Running the floor. Embiid stuffs it.
Harden for three. James Harden with his second triple.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Pick Swap Podcast. It is a 2-2 series in the Sixers Heat Eastern Conference semifinals matchup. So me and Sean are feeling it today. How you doing, brother?
Yeah, vibes are high. I mean, Sixers are back. Joel Embiid back. Harden's aging backwards. What a performance in Game 4. So thrilled with how the teams looked these past two games. No MVP, no problem. Happy how they look, and we got a whole new series on our hands.
Yeah, man. Last night was maybe one of my favorite games that I've watched, maybe ever. That was just such an enjoyable game. Start to finish, it was close. It was competitive. Jimmy Butler had a fantastic night, which was annoying. But the rest of them, the rest of the Miami Heat team struggled from all over. Joel Embiid, defensive masterclass. James Harden scoring 16 in the fourth quarter, going 6 of 10 from three. Just I don't know, just everything that could have gone right. It felt like at times went right. The oop to Tobias to kind of the dagger, a ton of fun. Just a super fun, enjoyable game. So I'm feeling great today.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we haven't talked since after Game 2 when they were down 0-2. So a drastically different series from that. And obviously Joel Embiid is the story in terms of coming back, being able to play. It's so crazy to me because I just can't wrap my mind around that he is on the court right now and playing. He's dealing with multiple injuries that hold guys out for weeks at a time in terms of still the torn ligament in his thumb, still the broken bone in his face, got the mask on, cleared concussion protocol, and he's out there, and he's looked healthier than I even expected him to look. The way he's moving, the way he seems to be feeling, I think the shot is not fully there. A couple of his three-pointers were big time off. He banked the one in, but the one was just to the left, and that felt like a little bit of a control issue to me. We've seen him not get passes exactly where he wants, but for the most part, just way more healthy than I expected at this point. The defense and just his presence alone makes such a difference to this team. The way the Heat are matching up is entirely different with him on the court. And I mean, he's the best player on both sides of the court for a reason. So I'm thrilled to have him back, and it's definitely revitalized this Sixers team.
Yeah, man, it's changed everything, right? You look at the way this team has looked, and a lot of people, the numbers aren't sticking out. They're not gaudy. They're not oh my gosh, look at what Joel Embiid's doing. But he's been efficient. He's been incredibly efficient from the field. Honestly, the free throws are pissing me off a little bit more than anything else. Not struggling per se from the line, but uncharacteristically missing a handful of free throws, but getting to the line a good amount. Defensively, like you said, not just protecting the rim, but two incredible different plays last night where he switched out on the perimeter, locked up guys like Butler, and there's points in time late in that game where the Heat were going small, and Embiid's matchup was Jimmy Butler, which is incredible just to say that a 7-foot+ center's main match on defensively is a small forward, an all-star small forward. So it just speaks to what he is defensively and what he's done to change the game. The pick and roll isn't nearly as effective. Bam Adebayo has been neutralized on that end as well. So we could go on and on, I think, about Embiid and what he does. It's just he doesn't even have to score. His scoring is his best attribute at this point in his career, and he doesn't even have to do that to be a super impactful player. So, again, it just speaks to who he is, to this team.
Yeah, it's crazy thinking about his career trajectory. And when Joel Embiid came into the league, all he harped on was about his defense, about his goal was to be a defensive player of the year candidate. He's still echoed that sentiment pretty recently even. And to see him develop into a guy who obviously led the league in scoring, who is the most dominant player, the entire Sixers offense runs through him. And to just his offense overshadows how great he is defensively, because he really just is phenomenal on that side of the floor. And I mean, the play where he got switched onto Oladipo and just stuck with him, put on a defensive masterclass, which turned into Oladipo throwing a pass right off Harden's leg. And just for a guy his size to be able to get that low, stick with a guy who is no slouch in terms of trying to score, trying to do his thing in Victor Oladipo. And sure, he's not the superstar or whatever, but just that level of defense on a guard like that is absolutely absurd for his size. And it was there. Bam Adebayo, to a guy who is pretty universally regarded as a upper echelon tier center, is just such a massive gap between Bam and Embiid that it's crazy. Like, Bam looks terrified to match up with Joel Embiid. And after really eating the first 2 games, and Bam had a little bit of a bounce back night in game 4. He ended with over 20 in it. He had 21, but only 7 boards again. Coming off game 3 where he really did absolutely nothing. The Heat had to go small. Dwayne Dedmon was out with the illness, which changed a lot of things for him. That's why we got a lot of the more flashes of Embiid on the perimeter. And I think that's an area the Heat had circle where they thought that was an advantage. And it just frankly is not, because there's no facet of the defensive game that Embiid cannot dominate and is capable of handling. So to see that put on full display on the biggest stage, his defense is what's winning the Sixers team games right now. Like, even talking about through the first 2 games, the Sixers, they allowed 108 last night. They held the Heat to 79 in game 3. Like, that's just absurd defensive impact. And to really just be willing this team, and just everything about his return, just the energy, the presence, it just has made this team click again. And we're seeing it in a way that, like, I feel like we haven't seen in several weeks going back.
Yeah, it feels like the first stretch when Harden first got here. I mean, the Heat should be thanking whatever God they believe in above that Embiid did not play in games 1 and 2. This series is so much different. Because I would put my life savings, which isn't much, but my life savings onto that they win at least 1 game in Miami. In that those first 2 games. Like, I don't know. It's often, not often. It occasionally happens where there's games where I watch the Sixers and I say, okay, they're not losing today. Like, going through that third quarter, it was back and forth. Miami came out with a little punch. I got nervous at times. I was up and down out of my seat, but that's how I am anyway. But like, at no point was I ever like, this game's over. Like, the Sixers aren't going to win this one. It's weird. It happens occasionally. Normally that feeling I have in my stomach is correct. I haven't felt like I've been betrayed by them. I have before, but when they've blown those leads, I was kind of like, this isn't safe. You know what I mean? Yeah. Where, last night and the night, or the game before game 3, both times I was like, this is a game that I feel the Sixers have in their hands. That with the guys that they have on this team, I'm not worried about it. And even last night when the game was within 1, tied, I wasn't worried. I figured this team they're gonna bounce back. And then starting the fourth quarter without Embiid on the floor, and them extending the lead, just incredible. And I wanted to touch back one more thing on Embiid before we move forward, because there's a lot more to talk about in this game. We mentioned the oop to Tobias late in that game, kind of the dagger. What I want to point out with Embiid is there's such a mature aspect to him as a player right now. And late in that game, Miami was doing everything they possibly could to keep the ball out of his hands. Couldn't even touch it.
And he was working his ass off to get the ball too.
Yeah, and they weren't letting him touch it. It was Bam, it was PJ Tucker, it was Jimmy. It was everyone that could help and play defense on him. They were helping and playing defense on him. But it allowed James Harden to dominate in that fourth quarter. It allowed Tobias Harris to get a few shots in that fourth quarter. And, a couple years ago, I feel like Embiid would have needed that ball, would have needed it in his hands. He recognized the situation. He ran right to the corner in that play before the oop and got out of the way, brought 2 guys with him. And like, I can't believe that that's where he is right now. And he's such a smart basketball player. And I think, you said the defense goes unnoticed. I think his basketball IQ is even more unnoticed. And there's plays like that, some people will still watch and not even recognize it. But that deserves to be applauded, the way that he handled himself late in that last night's game. Even with, the game on the line, he was mature enough to stay out of the way when he needed to.
Yeah, 100%. And he was fighting for post position throughout. I thought he did a great job early on in the game, getting early post position. Harden got him a couple bunnies, a couple just terrific opportunities to score, which he capitalized on, had 15 quick points. Looking at late in the game, like you said, the Heat were just all over clouding him and not allowing him to get the ball. And as he worked, as he fought, he was trying. And the fact that it took that much effort from the Heat to defend a guy who wasn't even touching the ball is just a massive credit to Embiid's impact and to the Sixers for finding other ways to win. As much as Embiid has been this team for so long, we have other guys now, and James Harden was there to step up yesterday. The story to me, like you said, was to open that fourth quarter without Embiid and find a way to extend that. As the fourth quarter started, it was 89-85 Sixers. By the time Embiid checked back in with 7:11 left in the fourth, they were up 101-89. So to grow that from a 4-point to a 12-point lead with your best player on the bench is just a crazy performance. And James Harden, specifically filling his role for what this Sixers team needs, like a lot of his baskets last night were opportunities where it was just shot clock winding down, isolation, go get something. And I mean, 6 for 10 from three is crazy. 31 points is awesome. 16 fourth quarter points is exactly what we could have hoped for. And I was thrilled to see it. I saw more emotion from him than I've seen in probably his entire time here. I thought it was awesome, him yelling at the crowd, him flexing, him giving people high fives. So very cool to see that. He filled his role, did a great job passing throughout too. And I thought it was cool how he was just able to step up and seize the moment.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I can't say enough about his performance last night. You know, texting my friends, like texting you, texting some other people during that game and just being like, holy shit, he's really like, this is vintage James Harden. Like, we're actually seeing it. And, you know, this is the kind of performance that we've been looking for to say, like, you know, is it still in there? Like, does he still have that? I think the frustrations that have come with James Harden over the last couple of weeks is like, we've been waiting for that. You don't need that every night because normally, you know, Embiid's, you know, the series is a little bit different if Embiid plays more, you know, if Embiid's scoring more, you know, if he's not injured like that. You know, a lot of things go into this, but to be able to have that option, be able to have James Harden, you know, kind of in your back pocket, which is such a weird way to talk about James Harden because for the majority of his career, he's been at the forefront of every offense he's played in. But in this offense with these guys, he's the facilitator. And scoring is kind of his secondary, tertiary option. So to have him as a scorer in that sense, for him to be able to come out and take over a quarter, give you 16, facilitate, but also like just having that presence, having him there with the ball in his hands. I'm way less worried about what's going to happen when the ball's in his hands compared to guys that, you know, have been here in the past, have handling the ball in the past. So I don't know, man. Last night was incredible. He got to the rim well too. He took advantage. He's so smart too. Like,
yeah.
With Embiid, you know, like we talked about with Embiid having multiple guys on him, like constantly, the defense doing everything they can to stop him. He took advantage. Tyler Hero is like a turnstile. Just, you know, every time that he got switched onto him, it was like, oh shit, okay, I guess I'm going to get right to the rim this time. But even Victor Oladipo couldn't hold him. There's guys all along that team that can't hold him. So yeah, I was very, very happy. I mean, I think all Sixers fans were, but like just ecstatic about what we saw from him. And hopefully, you know, maybe it's not a sign to come that he'll be giving you 30 a night, but shooting the ball a little bit better, being more confident in that shot, you know, and just looking like he's enjoying the moment. I loved it, like every second of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen the relationship between Harden and Embiid develop. They rank first out of any pairing in the past 5 seasons in pick and roll production, which is absurd in the small sample size that we've seen from them. And I also think the relationship between James Harden and Paul Reed is developing pretty quickly.
Yeah.
He only had 1 bucket last night, Paul Reed, but it was on a very nice play where Harden beat a guy, had a one-on-one, a nice bounce pass that led to the dunk from Paul Reed. And from Reed specifically, it was a read where he created the spacing for himself. He backed up off his defender as the defender stepped up to create that lane where he just got the pass and dunked it. And it's a credit to Harden for being able to execute on that and even see that pass because it was one of the more advanced bounce passes for sure. But even beyond that, there were plenty of moments to the game where it feels like there is something there with the Paul Reed and James Harden thing. And I mean, like we've talked about repetitively with the backup center situation, like it's not that complex role of a center if you're playing alongside James Harden in terms of you need to screen hard, roll hard, grow to the basket, be ready to catch lobs. Like you're going to get opportunities. And to see Paul Reed continue to capitalize on this, his stats don't jump off the charts once again, but his activity is there. The hustle is there. It was the full B-ball Paul experience last night, but he helped the team once again. And I mean, he was a +3 in 10 minutes. He's a plus in across all his playoff minutes net average, which the Sixers have not had that type of backup center production ever in Embiid's time. So it's a credit to Paul Reed for staying ready, even when like it really wasn't looking like he was going to be cut out for any sort of minutes. And Sixers fans and media members pretty much had to throw a flat riot to get the opportunity. But to see him just cashing in on this opportunity and making the most of it is awesome to me. And a major reason why that they're seeing success in these past 2 games.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of credit goes to the role players, Paul Reed included, obviously. And again, I think, you know, we've gone so back and forth this playoffs, this postseason with Doc Rivers, but I think credit to him. Again, I think he coached very, very well last night. Kind of start to finish, I thought he did a great job. You know, you think about the fourth quarter. Getting the timeout that they called to get Embiid back in the game was like as simple as it seems, right? As like as straightforward as it seems as a coach to be like, okay, call timeouts at the right spot. It's a difficult task. It's a hard kind of balance to have, but it was like the perfect timeout. Get Embiid, get DG back in the game. But to give credit to Paul Reed, I think he's been great. There's something about him. The play's never over when Paul Reed's on the court. There was like 2 or 3 times last night he, fighting with Bam Adebayo for the rebound, or for like even when Bam had the ball, still reaching in, trying to get the ball loose. He knocked the ball out of, I think it was Gabe Vincent's hands in the fourth quarter to kind of keep the run going. Just those things, those little things that he does that nobody else on the Sixers team does. We talked about how unique he is as a player. I thought it was perfect. And I think right now, him as the backup is working so well because he just, you talked about it specifically a lot this season, that there wasn't ever like a change of pace. There wasn't ever like the reserves would come in and kind of just do the same thing that the starters are doing.
Yeah.
And just not as well. Whereas I think Paul Reed is such a vastly different player than what Joel Embiid is at the 5, that they can change the way that they play. They can push the pace. They can, stay more on the pick and roll heavy and move the ball a little bit more. So I've really liked what I've seen from Paul. I really like what I've seen from the way that they've used Paul. And maybe that's a credit to Doc or James Harden, maybe a little bit of both. But, I think that this kind of his role right now is perfect for what they need him. He's not doing too much. He's not doing not enough. I think he's kind of falling in and, filling out that role exactly what they need him to do.
Yeah, one of my frustrations for quite some time with the Sixers is just the mindset for the backup center of getting a guy who's just a worse version of Joel Embiid is never going to be a recipe for success.
No.
Like, Embiid is the most important guy on both sides of the court. So to have a guy in that same role who just simply is not that good, because there are very few guys that are capable of filling that. Like, Embiid is in a very much his own tier in terms of that. So to fill that in with a guy like a Dwight Howard or an Andre Drummond or a Greg Monroe or whoever else you want to name down the list that is kind of a similar style and just simply not that good, like, it's just not going to work. So my pros in the Paul Reed favor to this is that he is something different. He's switchable defensively. He's active. He works hard. He just is a grinder out there. And to have a guy that does all that dirty work and allow the other guys to just run different sets, create 3-point shots, do whatever they want to do, while Paul Reed is pretty much just like a menace down low and making things happen. I think that's perfect. I think that makes a ton of sense. And also beyond just for Paul Reed, I think when he was starting in the 2 games in Embiid's absence, I think for him, he was a little too in his own head in terms of like, I can't foul, like I need to play more minutes in this. Now that he's back to his like simplified role, we're seeing like the Paul Reed, like he doesn't have to worry. He had 2 fouls in 10 minutes last night. That's nothing. You can foul more than that if you want, man. Like you can use all 6 now. We don't need you for extended minutes. So I think it's great that he can be fully unleashed again. And like, it's working as much as like, you're not seeing the eye-popping stats or maybe what you're hoping for. Like, the production is still there, and it's freeing for the rest of the team that he's able to fill in that like grinder role.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, to kind of go through the rest of these, like the role players, I thought, Danny Green had 11 last night. He played well. 3 of 4 from 3. Is that right? Only 4 3-point attempts. That seems low for DG in a playoff game. George Niang, 10 points, hit a couple threes, 2 of 5. Maxey, 18, 2 of 5 from 3, 5 of 10 from the floor. I thought Matisse Thybulle was effective last night. Hit a 3, had a nice dunk. Like, when the Sixers are clicking, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, when they're clicking on all cylinders and you get 5 points from this guy and you get, a couple from, I thought Shake in his couple minutes, I thought Shake came in, he bodied Tyler Hero and clapped in his face. And I was like, I love that. I don't care if he plays for 8 minutes and only has 2 points. Like, if those are the 2 points that he gets and he's talking shit, like, I love that. And I hope that he gets that role every night. Like, I have no problem with that. If Thybulle's coming in, he had a couple, deflections, steals. Sometimes he's still very frustrating. It seems now that he's so used to doing like the chase down, kind of try to block it from the back, that like he almost forgets that he's allowed to defend a shot and contest the shot from the front. There was one with Tyler Hero. He ended up missing it. It was like he stepped through and like laid it up, ended up airballing for, a shot clock violation. But like, Thybulle had him right on him and he tried to reach from behind to block it. But like, beside the point, really. But, they struggled so much early on in this series. George sucked from 3 and Matisse Thybulle was a non-factor and Shake wasn't even playing and Danny Green couldn't shoot. And, all of those things kind of are realigned where I guess they do say that, role players play much better at home. They get the boost from the crowd. They feel more comfortable. Maybe that makes sense, but I think it's just Joel Embiid being back, and all these guys are a little bit more free. And I'm glad that they didn't stop shooting or get uncomfortable. They decided to just keep pushing. And, I think those guys, those 4 or 5 guys deserve a lot of credit. We haven't even talked about Tobias Harris yet, really. But him and Tyrese, again, had, really solid nights. And, doing what they do beside those 2 stars in Harden and Embiid have been incredibly important, especially in games 3 and 4.
Yeah, and I think Tobias Harris becoming obviously Jimmy Butler is getting his, but I think Tobias has for the most part been very good when guarding him. And I mean the Heat are doing their best to get switches, but the fact that like you're trying to get Tobias off Jimmy Butler is a massive testament to how much he's improved as a defender, the effort that he is putting in on that side of the ball. Because that's really never been the Tobias Harris we've known. This is a guy that like not that he's ever been like a circled as a bad defender, but to be a guy that actually like locks up is something new to him and something that helps the Sixers team a great deal. I think that the Embiid Bam pairing and the Harris Butler pairing is how the Sixers should try and match up as often as possible. And I think the Sixers are getting the better of that and more often than not. And I do want to give Jimmy Butler credit because he is playing extremely well, doing his best to will this Heat team into contention and winning the series. I mean, it's still a 2-2 series. It's still Sixers have a long way to go, but this has just been a vastly different series since Embiid returns. And now that we're seeing this at full strength and the Heat, Kyle Lowry is not remotely healthy either. You can tell the way he's running out there. You can tell the hamstring that he's just doesn't quite have it. So respect to him for playing through it. I'm not going to call the Heat fully healthy based on that, but I just think everything has changed. And I really am. I could not be happier looking back at these past 2 games with how everything's been executed. And like you said about Doc Rivers, as much as he gets so much hate and has earned it throughout his tenure here at times, he's been tremendous this postseason, and I think just about the whole postseason. So I'm very happy with the strings he's pulling.
Yeah, I also want to point out, like, let me look to make sure exactly what it was because I want to see the. I mean, at one point, Victor Oladipo was out shooting the entire Sixers team from the free throw line. Oladipo had 10, Butler had 13, whereas Embiid had 13. And Harden had 10. So Victor Oladipo and Jimmy Butler combined for as many free throws. There was one point in time, like, I don't know. I don't have a problem with it. I'm not gonna blame the refs for anything. I thought that there were some questionable things that happened last night, but for both sides, I thought it was bad for Scott Foster is just a terrible ref. But Jimmy Butler to me.
They beat Scott Foster just as much as they beat the Heat last night, which we knew was coming. The Scott Foster game was bound to happen, and there it was.
Yeah, it was gonna happen. I'm glad it was last night. And they battled through it. But I thought Miami got the short end of the stick a few times. To be fair.
Yeah, I for the most part, I think he's like an all-around bad referee. More than anything, the one that was just blatantly missed to me that was crazy was the one that was, I believe the foul was called on Danny Green. It was of Kyle Lowry dribbling up the court, and then just like there was just basically zero contact, and Scott Foster. And I saw a funny tweet. Shout out Austin Krell, who tweeted that the problem with that call was that Scott Foster was in the proper position to see it and still got it entirely wrong. So it's just one of those that was right in front of him right there. And it's just like, all right, man. So I don't know what that was about, but for the most part, I think he's just kind of bad both sides, and that's just kind of who he is.
Yeah, no, totally. And I mean, I guess if there's one thing I can say about Embiid's game last night, it's the fact that he can't stay on his goddamn feet. Like when Jimmy Butler pump fakes, put your hand up and contest the shot. Like there was 3 or 4 times last night I'm yelling, stay on your feet. Like how many times? Just stay on your feet. Contest. If he makes the shot over you, congrats. But if you jump, he's either going to get fouled or he's going to walk right past you for a lip. That was the only thing that bothered me with Embiid. But I thought Jimmy Butler was fine. I don't like him. I don't like the way he plays. I don't like the Heat. So it's like pulling teeth, getting me to compliment them in kind of any capacity or giving them any credit because I just don't like them. So, and I don't have to. So it's okay for me right now.
I can't believe Duncan Robinson has yet to step on the court, especially last night. I can't believe he didn't get thrown in there.
Badly from 3. Like they shot so badly from 3.
Heat 7 of 35 from 3, 20% on the game. And Duncan Robinson, like, I mean, Eric Spoelstra must like honestly think he's the worst defender of all time if you're not even willing to like mix him in there. And like a guy that they paid pretty handsomely this offseason and that has a very, very nice track record as a shooter, as a 3-point guy. It's been surprising me. And I mean, I'm not going to stand up here and defend his defense, but he's still a guy that's like 6'7" and has enough length that should be able to at least stick with people. Like, it's been shocking to me just how far out of the rotation that Duncan Robinson is. And I think that he could use him, to be honest.
Yeah, man, after that game, I mean, after the last 2 games, they haven't shot. Actually, honestly, most of the series, they haven't shot very well. The Sixers have had a few good nights, game 3 specifically. But Miami, on their end, they haven't shot well at all. Maybe like 1 game they've shot well. Maybe game 2, they had a good night shooting. But, I think I'm very surprised. Like, I forget he exists sometimes. And then I see his like goofy looking ass on the bench and I'm like, oh, I forgot he was there. At first I thought he was hurt. Where he's not on the injury report. What's going on? I'm very surprised that they haven't played him. But I think that otherwise, like the Sixers have done a pretty good job at neutralizing all of their threats. Obviously, they're not shooting well, which is something that like you can't really control or you can't control for them or yourself really. But like even guys like Tyler Hero, like he didn't have a good night last night. I thought he's the Sixers have done a better job at chasing him around. Making life difficult for him to get, shots off, get the ball in his hands. And, Gabe Vincent, like those, I mean, Max Strus had a shit night, which like those guys, it happens to them. I mean, if you're really relying on Max Strus and Gabe Vincent to win you a playoff series, like I hate to break that to you, but like, that's not how you win. So if that was your plan all along and now you're like, oh shit, what's happening? I can't believe we're not playing well because Max Strus and Gabe Vincent aren't carrying us. Like that's a flawed position to be in to begin with. So that's on y'all. I don't have a problem with it. Like I'm not here for any sort of like heat sympathy. And, I can't wait, for game 5 because I'm excited for the rest of this series. I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah. I mean, from looking at this from a Heat perspective, like I'm not sure what adjustments they really can make when looking at like, obviously they're not going to shoot the ball that poorly, but then again, they've done it like 3 games now. So they had the one game where they shot closer to their average. They obviously led the league in 3-point shooting percentage this year, which is a testament to them, but they really just have not been good from this area. And when looking at like matchups specifically, Jimmy Butler's been good, like we said. Bam Adebayo, like for a guy that I like Bam, I do, but he is just not remotely in the same conversation as Joel Embiid, and there's just not a facet of the game that he is better than them at. Maybe catching lobs, I'll give you, and outside of that, like on both sides of the court, like Embiid is just outclassing him, and for that to be like. Really, I believe at this stage, their kind of big 3 punch is Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, and Jimmy Butler is kind of what the Heat's calling card, that and the role player stepping up. So for Bam to be one of your significant guys and just not being able to have any real shot in this matchup, I think is pretty game changing. And I don't really know what their adjustment from here is. So from a Sixers end, I feel pretty good. The game of Miami is still going to be tough. Game 5 is going to be a bloodbath. I'm not fully confident the Sixers for that one. I think this is pretty likely a 7-game series, but we just got to win one in Miami.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you guys are interested in betting on the rest of this series, betting on tomorrow night's game, or the outcome of the rest of this series, you guys can go check out BetUS, the leading sportsbook and casino in the market. We're super happy to be partnered with them. If you guys are interested in betting on this game, betting with BetUS, you can use our code PIGSWAP at login or check out the link in the bio here for the podcast on the YouTube or on Apple, iTunes, or Spotify. You can click that link, use our code PIGSWAP at login, get your first bet risk-free up to $500. Man, I don't know. I'm more confident, I feel like, in game 5. I don't think the Sixers lose again. I think the Sixers reverse win 4 straight. I think they're going to close it out at home. They're going to win game 5 in Miami, win game 6. I don't know what this outcome. I really wish we could turn back time and somehow get Embiid healthy for games 1 and 2, because I think just life changes so much for that. Miami just really out-rebounded them and outshot them in game 2, out-rebounded them and, scored more points because they didn't, the Sixers didn't have Embiid in game 1. It's like, I don't think personally, like DeAndre Jordan had to start and play full, like 25 minutes game. Like if we're really like, if that's what it boils down to, I don't know. It's hard for me to take that seriously. I think the Sixers are in a really good position. They have like strong momentum. Like I think we talked about going into game 3. We were like, honestly, we didn't feel like Miami had control of this series, even up 2-0. even up 2-0, we didn't think Miami had full control of the series. Obviously, the Sixers don't have full control of the series because it's even. It's 0-0 at this point. But the momentum is fully on their side, moving towards, hopefully them winning this series. I'm not going to go outright and say they're going to win this series. Guarantee it. I'm not going to guarantee it, obviously, but I feel really good about their chances in game 5, and then and potentially a closeout game in Game 6 at home. That feels really good. Hopefully it doesn't go to a Game 7, but you got to win 2 out of 3 from here. Danny Green talked about it right after the game last night. You got to win 2 out of 3. Got to win 1 in Miami. So I don't know, man. I feel good right now. Maybe it's the high from last night, but I'm feeling pretty good about it.
Yeah, no, I still do too. I mean, it's a best of 3 series now. They got to win 1 on the road. Going from down 0-2 to now 2-2 with your best player back in action, it's just like such a drastic organizational change in outlook on the series. And to have that in your back pocket, knowing like the Sixers are now like back. Like it feels like they tried to survive the first 2. They're now there. Like it's now showtime and that they're ready to go. So I like I said, I don't see any like tactical adjustments that I really think I thought that the painful part from their perspective should be that like I thought they made some decent adjustments and it still didn't work. Like we saw them when they went small and just packed the paint, that created some issues real briefly, and then the Sixers worked their way through and found a way to fight. That was notable in like the second quarter yesterday. I saw that a ton. The Dwayne Dedmon absence. Dedmon, who he's nothing special as a backup center, but just a guy that can kind of match like the size of Joel is pretty rare for a backup center. So I do think that's a noteworthy absence of yesterday. It'll be interesting how the rotation changed when he does return. It was just an illness, a non-COVID illness, so I expect him back pretty soon. I would think he plays in Game 5, depending on how he's feeling. But I think I just don't see really where the Heat go from here. So that's a credit to the Sixers. If James Harden's hitting step back threes like that, there's not a lot that you can do. So as much as Harden is kind of a hot and cold guy, and at this stage in his career, there's going to be a lot of the hot and cold there. 6 for 10 from 3 is pretty unbeatable from the Sixers perspective.
Yeah, I mean, we've mentioned it before. This postseason started hot and cold is good and bad. But if he can catch a hot streak at the right time, changes the outlook of the Sixers season like pretty drastically. I mean, not to mention that Jimmy Butler had 40 points last night. Like, do I think Jimmy Butler is going to have 40 points tomorrow or the game after? I don't really think so. So I think the Sixers have a good chance right now. We haven't seen the best Embiid like by any means in this series yet. And Maxey and Tobias are still like Maxey had some good games earlier on. Maxey didn't have the best game last night. So the Sixers do have a lot of options down the list. And I'm feeling good right now. And I think going into Miami, it's not a hostile environment. Not the way that it's some other places are made out to be. It's not Boston. Hell, it's not even MSG. So I got no problems going down there. I hope I'm excited for Game 5. I really am. But to move forward a little bit, some pretty disappointing news this morning. Some expected but disappointing news this morning. Nikola Jokic wins the MVP back-to-back, second-time MVP. I don't want to disparage him by any means. We don't want to say that Jokic is a bad player at all, but I think it's pretty. I don't know. I think it's disrespectful to the game. I think it's disrespectful to Joel Embiid. I think it's disrespectful to the players around the league to note Nikola Jokic as the MVP for the second year in a row. And he's sitting at home right now. So how do you feel right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not shocked by it at all. I think this was pretty known for a little bit of time now. I was disappointed. I hated all like the rumors and all the weird like NBA leaks, and that was given like a second hope of Embiid winning it. But I mean, it really is disappointing to see the type of year Joel Embiid have and for it not to be rewarded. And I mean, a guy that led the league in scoring, first center to do it since Shaq in 1999-2000, averaged 30.6 points, 11.7 rebounds, 4.2 assists, 1.5 blocks, 1.1 steals, a guy that was just everywhere on both sides of the court. The Sixers were 6-8 without him. He helped them survive all the madness of the Ben Simmons situation. The trade for Harden is somehow like a notch against Embiid, when really like none of that comes together if it's not for Embiid keeping this organization afloat. And think about that. He had this Sixers team at the top of the East for a portion of this season without either Harden or Simmons playing for this team. And like for a guy whose second best player was a 21-year-old Tyrese Maxey, and he had the helping Tobias Harris. And I just is frustrating me. I feel like this was the goalpost continues to move in terms of like last year he didn't play enough games. He played more games this year. He set a career high in games and minutes. And for it still not to be rewarded after improving on his year last year, which was another just heroic season, it's really just kind of sad to me.
Yeah, and I mean, I would like to hear any testimony from anyone not playing for the Nuggets this year for Nikola Jokic. I think there's maybe very few, if any, where there's countless amounts of guys that have said Embiid is the MVP. There's countless amount of people around the game of basketball that are saying Embiid is the MVP. And kind of what we talked about earlier this year, saying, I understand Jokic is fantastic. I understand what he does, as a player, what he does for his team. I get that. But he was not the best player in the league, no, not the most valuable player in this league last year and this year. Mm-hmm. One of the two, fine, sure, okay, I can digest that. We're talking about legacy. We're talking about history here. We're not talking about Vorp and Raptor. We're talking about the history of the game of basketball. When you look back, Nikola Jokic has more MVPs than Kobe Bryant. He has more MVPs than Shaquille O'Neal. He has more MVPs than Dirk Nowitzki. Is Nikola Jokic in that conversation? No. We're talking about the history of the game of basketball at this point. We're not talking about this year or last year. Joel Embiid deserves to be in that conversation. Joel Embiid deserves to be mentioned when you're talking about the most valuable players of all time, what he's done for this team, what he's done for this franchise, what he's meant to this city as a player. He embodies that. Nikola Jokic does not. Nikola Jokic doesn't give a shit about this. He gave his MVP trophy away. He doesn't care. He's great. He's a fantastic player. He's unique. He's incredible. He does a lot of things that we haven't seen from a player, maybe ever. He does not deserve 2 MVP trophies. He just doesn't. And I can't believe that they've allowed it to happen twice. Once, I understand, and I can get that. Twice, with his team being knocked out in the first round both times, no, I can't get that.
Yeah, I mean, it is frustrating. It's definitely like one of those. I mean, the two organizations are in very different outlooks for this season, and the Nuggets were in a gap. We're in a gap year. The Nuggets had zero pressure on them. The Nuggets played like 3 important games all season in terms of what they did, and I get Jokic is pretty much the entire team in terms of schematic and what they do. A lot of his numbers are because of that. Like he is the point guard of that team, and this guy has no business being listed as a center except for the fact that he's 7 feet tall. Like. Mm-hmm. He obviously can rebound the hell out of the ball. He can pass like crazy, but this like growth in the advanced stats, embracing and just like his numbers are all fluffed up. And to me, it's a flawed logic that like his assist numbers count for more than any guard or wing because he's a center. When it looks at how the numbers are calculated for all the offensive box plus minus and all the advanced metrics for that. And to me, it's like defensively is where I just get blown away in this. You can spit whatever advanced metrics you look at me. It is night and day difference between Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic. I mean, we're talking about the Nuggets center who was subbed out with their season on the line for a 1-play needed defensive stop. That the Nuggets said our best chance to get a stop here is for this guy to not even be on the floor. And to me, you just cannot be the most valuable player if you're not helping your team win games like that. And we will never, ever see that with Joel Embiid. I mean, I think this series has made it crystal clear more than anything in terms of the way that he has wrapped up on the perimeter, the way he has shut down Bam Adebayo for stretches, the way he just has absolutely drastically changed just from his sheer presence of being in the paint and his impact defensively. And that never gets enough weight. I think it's incredible how he's able to be the most valuable player on both sides of the court, because as much as Jokic is tremendous offensively, he just is not that for the Nuggets.
No, I mean, I don't know. There's no amount of numbers or, calculations that like can convince me that Nikola Jokic is the best. Like, if that's really what we're talking about, like what has the game become if that's really what we're talking about? If on the list of like attributes for him this season is like highest like PER ever, like if that's the, number 3 thing on his list of like reasons why he should be the MVP, like throw out the argument there. Watch the game of basketball. See what people around the game of basketball are saying. Every player that has come out and talked about it, so many, you have like dozens of people that are in and around the game of basketball that have played the game of basketball that are not saying that, are saying that Embiid is the MVP, or not saying that Nikola Jokic is the MVP. And like, again, it's no disrespect to him. I don't mean to sound like I don't appreciate what he is as a player.
Yeah.
I think Nikola Jokic is great. But again, when we're talking about the most valuable player, like, I'm sorry that Jamal Murray took a year and a half to come back from an ACL injury. I'm sorry that happened. I'm sorry that you drafted Michael Porter Jr. and signed him to a supermax extension with the history of back surgeries and injuries that he's had. That's not our problem. That's not Joel Embiid's problem. Hell, that's not even Nikola Jokic's problem. But for the fact that you guys are saying, and people around the league are saying, oh, well, this guy was down and this guy was out. His team was a 6th in the West. He won less games than Joel Embiid, who didn't have his best guy.
Yeah.
Second best guy. Like, to me, those arguments are kind of moot at this point, because they're similar in what they are, except one guy's team finished in the top 4 of his conference, and the other one finished 6th and got knocked out in the first round in 5 games. There's levels, there's differences. Like, and I know the playoffs don't factor in. I understand that, and it's kind of like frustrating that they don't, seeing that, and they should just start giving away the award right at the end of the regular season, so you can avoid shit like this.
Yeah.
It's kind of the point.
For sure.
But like, I really don't. I think it's just really a shame, honestly. And I got into an argument with some guy a couple of weeks ago on Twitter when this first kind of all came out. And we kind of figured that Jokic was going to win. And I was like, I think it is a shame that Embiid doesn't get it. I think his legacy is on the line. The history of what he is to this game is on the line. And when he's putting up historic things like most 40 point 10 rebound games in history, first 30 point per game center since Moses Malone in 1982. First center to league lead in scoring since 1990, 2000. Like, since the year I was born. Like, I'm 22 years old. That hasn't happened in my lifetime. Like, that kind of shit really, like, that means something to the game. That is doing something to the game. That is being something more than the game. That's Joel Embiid.
Yeah, and to talk about, like, more of the flawed setup of all this, like, Embiid is probably not even going to be the All-NBA first team this year, which is absurd. Yeah. Like, I think
2 years in a row.
2 years in a row, yeah. And you want to talk about, like, Giannis, Embiid, and Jokic, I think are universally regarded as like the best 3 players in the league this year. And for any of those guys to not be on the first team is ridiculous. And for some made up team that is purely for just accolades and isn't actually a game played, it makes zero sense not to just be able to let that happen, especially given the fact like Embiid and Jokic could absolutely play on the court together if that circumstance was to come. Yeah. When talking about like the center position specifically, what this all NBA spot is about, I personally just don't believe that there's a recipe for success for an NBA team if your center cannot lock down the paint defensively. If you don't have a rim protecting center that can just intimidates guys from being inside. And Nikola Jokic is not that. He is not the best center in the NBA because he cannot do those things. And you can talk about he's a great passer. He does all this. He does all these extra things. That's great. But if you cannot do one of the defining traits of your position, you simply are not the best at it, in my mind. And that's value to Embiid. It's a massive credit for him to be able to do all the additional things that he does do while being the dominant paint presence. But I just cannot wrap my mind around that this happened again. I'm not shocked, but it is definitely disappointing to hear. And when we talk about the Embiid's legacy as a whole, like these are things that do matter in terms of like what the accolades are. When we're talking about like this guy is going to go down as a Hall of Famer and all-time great, and to not have those nice little check marks next to his name is disappointing. And I'm sure it's something that bothers Embiid more than he wants to admit. This is a guy that's out there still playing with a torn ligament, a broken bone, and obviously winning is the number one thing in his mind. But there's just such a difference, and I feel like the way these two guys attack the game and the production that comes from it. And for Embiid to raise the ceiling of his team far further than Jokic has raised his this year or any year, I think is enough of a statement in itself.
Yeah, and a lot of people say like the winning has to come first before you get like this kind of respect, but like clearly that's not true. Jokic has less team success than Embiid does, and Giannis got his MVPs before his final season, so I don't know, man. It's frustrating. I think the NBA should really needs to take a look in the mirror at this voting process. Their awards this year were terrible. Like, I think just like you're making a mockery of your own league. I genuinely, like, I don't mean that because I'm pissed off about Embiid not winning the MVP. I mean that because it's so there's no actual range. There's no actual like curriculum. There's no actual certification to what it means to be the most improved player or the most valuable player or rookie of the year or whatever. I think that system needs to be trashed and built back up from the beginning, because there's no world that John Morant is the most improved player in the league. Really, there's no world where I think Nikola Jokic is the MVP of the league. Rookie of the Year is fine. Who actually cares? But like, there's like fundamental flaws in what they do, and how they go about doing this, voting for these MVPs, voting for the MIPs. That has to change if they want to keep this consistent. Because like the MVP like means something when you're talking about, like, especially in this this debate section of basketball culture. It's embedded in the basketball culture. In 15 years, and you're talking about Joel Embiid, and if he goes, oh dude, he wasn't even first team All NBA. When really, like, we all saw this, we all witnessed this. In reality, he is much, much more than that. He should have been an MVP, should have been first team All NBA, first team All Defense, like that type of shit. And unfortunately, it's going to go down that he may never have some of those things, and that's disappointing. And I think that's unfair to him as a player. But we got more important fish to fry. There's basketball still to be played, unlike Jokic. So
yeah, it's obviously a regular season award, but I mean, this series with the Heat is a pretty clear example of just how valuable Joel Embiid is, from turning around from being down 0-2 with the Sixers just simply not looking good enough to them fairly convincingly winning the next 2 games is a straight up statement right there. So I'm sure that's what the Sixers' minds are. They're moving on to Game 5. They still have plenty to play for this series, and the postseason is really what matters. I think anybody who has watched the Sixers this postseason and did vote for Jokic can pretty much make the call that there was a mistake there. So the Sixers are moving on. They've got plenty more to play for. There's still 3 games left in this series, hopefully less than that, but we'll see.
Yeah, man. So the Sixers play again tomorrow evening in Miami. Game 5 on the way. I don't know, man. I'm super excited. I know we're both very excited. We'll talk to you guys later in the week to cover games 5, maybe games 5 and 6, depending on what day we get back on the mic with you guys. But until then, if you guys are going to keep up with us, you can follow Sean at Sean_Bernard1 on Twitter. You can follow me at JSPrain17. Follow the pod at PickSwapPod. Check out the YouTube. Find us anywhere you get your podcast, whether that's Spotify or Apple iTunes. Make sure you check out BetUS and use our code PickSwap at login, or click the link below and get your first bet risk-free up to $500. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and we'll talk to you later in the week.